Good morning, everybody. Short, sharp, punchy. Has everybody had coffee this morning? Are you going to help? We've got about half an hour. We don't have time for QA, so we'll save that for the panel. But for those of you that have kind of seen me present, I represent Google Enterprise here in the UK. I actually run the Google Apps business. So Google Apps for us, the platform, which it covers is our software as a service, our platform as a service, but also our devices. The devices include Android for Enterprise, but also more recently Chrome OS and the Chromebooks that you may have seen launched on June the 15th. So I think of the 6 events, this is the 4th time I've had the opportunity to meet and present to the forum. So it's great to represent Google and to meet so many of you. I'm going to be here 2 or 3 times during the day, and as I said, I'll also sit on the panel, so hopefully we'll have some time to answer some questions. Now, I guess the journey that we've been talking about this year has been very much around what are some of the trends that many of you are looking to take advantage of as businesses? What are some of the inhibitors or the challenges that we hear every day that you're also facing and actually not being able to take advantage of those trends? We also then moved on to another session which is specifically around the next generation of devices. And I think it's pretty fair to say that the mobile different kind of device and form factor market has been transformed in the last 2 or 3 years, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. We did have a specific session, but I'll talk in a bit more detail. I think the great thing about working for Google is, even within a 2-month period, an awful lot has happened. I'll share some stats with you today, specifically about Android, that I think you're going to be pretty surprised with, and it's even surprising to us. But today is actually a repeat of a discussion we had a couple of months ago, and I think the feedback from that was, look, this is fundamental to everyone here, to you and to us. Because the question is, does the business case of cloud computing actually stack up? And if so, where is that business case? Where does it lie? Is it around cost avoidance, lowering TCO, total cost of ownership? Or is there an opportunity now to start to look at more business value? Now, business transformation is a very bold word that almost suggests that I can change my business model, the way that I go to market. Now, a fantastic example of that is, you think about the ISV community at the moment. Now, when is the last time that the audience downloaded a client-side application? Probably very few of you. What we're seeing now, obviously, is browser-based applications. A number of ISVs are using platform as a service to actually redevelop their own IT estate and provision that to end users. So actually this kind of cloud revolution or enhancement is actually going in all different areas, including the technology sector, such as Google. And you'll see more and more software firms launching software as a service-based cloud offerings now and moving forward. It's a very significant trend for us because for us, of course, we can do and provision that at a much lower total economic value, which we can pass on to our customers. Now, 25 minutes to half an hour is, you'd think, long enough to present to the audience. And then, of course, Hannah and Emma say, you as the audience have actually said that there are a number of different areas that you'd like to have covered. This is not just about TCO versus kind of business agility. And actually, from the polling that was done about 3 months ago, there are kind of 6 or 7 key areas that you wanted to have covered. Is cloud disruptive? Collaboration, communication, agility, speed to market, innovation, board approval. What does board approval actually look like? And the mobile cloud. Now, I'm going to try and pick off as many of these categories as I can, but actually, each one of those merits its own particular session. And again, I'd ask you to come and spend some time with us on our stand today. Google's got a number of my team here. So we'll concentrate on 3 things. Let's kind of break it into 3 areas. One is, let's set the scene again. What are the big trends? What are the inhibitors? What are the measurable benefits? The measurable benefit in the past has only been about cost avoidance and total cost of ownership. But we're now starting to see some very interesting customer validation and third-party analyst validation around other measurable benefits in specific business value. And we have examples, and I'll share those with you. And how does that align to the board? What is it as senior IT leaders such as yourself, IT managers, IT directors, CIOs, what are you being asked to do? Now, the feedback that we've had from a lot of CIOs that we spend time with is actually the CEO and the board are asking them to do a little bit more now than look at cost avoidance, because we're coming out of this economic duress that we've all been under for 3 or 4 years. And there are probably 4 or 5 key themes that we're seeing that we're being asked to align to when we're putting a business case together. Now, there are 3 macro trends that we believe that organizations are currently being faced with. I don't know any business that isn't asking IT to deliver data, content, and applications to them more quickly, with more relevant data. Oh, and by the way, that application needs to be highly relevant and extremely quick. And IT, at the same time, given the last 3 or 4 years, are actually operating probably without a significant increase in budget. Now, businesses are doing that because they want to have competitive differentiation. They want to have agility. They want to bring products to market more quickly. Now, that's never changed. But the challenge is IT is still shackled with a legacy approach to architectures. And it's really, really difficult for people to do that. But this is still a key driver. The second one is around mobility. And again, the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen a seismic shift in the enterprise market. Consumer market, yes, but also the enterprise market. This term, the post-PC era, is becoming quite well used in the industry, especially in in press. Now, most people, even very well-recognized analysts from the Gartners, the McKinsey, the Forresters, said actually they thought that the post-PC era, as in when the PC became the secondary device to access content, was going to be in about mid-2012. And actually what happened, it was called in December last year. So many of the world's leading analyst firms were 18 months out. And they were out of date within 3 or 4 months of publishing. And that's the pace of change that is going on in the mobile space. Now, why is that important? All of us, as end users, whether it's consumers or enterprise users, we are getting used to a different user experience, a different UI. And what that's actually doing is setting our own expectations. Remember, if you think about many, many years ago when we were first using search engines. You'd go onto Yahoo and you'd search for sport, and it'd be kind of rugby, and there's rugby union, rugby league, so we click on rugby union. It was about classification. That's how you found things. You'd classify through information. You'd click, click, click. Wind forward now. You go onto a search engine, you expect to have top 3 results sub-second, and it better be right, otherwise you're going to shift supplier. That is our user experience of search engines. We have this heightened user expectation that everything must work. And the same thing is happening in the workplace. And a lot of that behavior is being driven by the mobile. So when I think I first spoke here in February, we talked about Android, and we talked about RIM, we talked about iOS. And we were activating, I think, at the beginning of the year, somewhere around 200 to 220,000 Android activations every day. Next time I came, it was up to 300 and 350, then 400. So I think it was in the middle of May where there was the last Cloud Circle event, and we announced there that we were activating 400,000 devices a day. It was announced last week, that's gone up to 500,000. Now that pace of change is incredible, and it is changing the way that IT are having to manage the IT perimeter, because we are all trying to access corporate data, corporate content, on a plethora of different devices, including smartphones, including iPads, including Zooms, and IT's thinking, hang on a minute, this is getting quite tough. I'm used to having my IT perimeter, and I understand my security. So IT is constantly now being pushed. The challenge is we're not going away as end users, because there are more and more form factors that will be coming out iteratively now forever. Now that's interesting, but what's more important from an enterprise perspective is that if we can actually provide access to information securely on any device, what a fantastic opportunity to improve productivity to end users that aren't shackled to a specific desktop in a specific office. And of course, those users who have before actually not had access to those desktops. Many organizations we speak to, let's say manufacturing or retail, the ratio for PC to non-PC, they may have a 1 to 4. There may be 4 staff who don't have any access, maybe except for one specific terminal they get access to maybe once a week. And it is the mobile piece that of all of these that is driving pace into cloud computing. And it's because of user expectation. The last one is around innovation. So for Google, for us, we are an engineering and an innovation company. Innovation for us, it's our competitive currency. It gives us the ability to have that one-step advantage over the more traditional technology partners. What we're seeing is that there is a very, very high correlation between a company's ability to collaborate, cross-company collaboration, not just individual productivity, and the net output, which is innovation. We started to see this in Google from day one. We're over 10 years old now. What's happened in the last 2 years is that independent reports have come out and said, actually, there is measurable benefit from allowing companies to collaborate more effectively. From a high level, office applications, your traditional office applications were designed to improve individual productivity. Cloud computing is not about individual productivity. It's about teamwork. It's about collaboration. It's having one single version of the truth where you go to. Now, there's a key difference when looking at the business cases. Don't think about just individual productivity. Think about the wider use case of teaming and in the mobile workplace. But there is always a but, okay? So reality check, where are we today? 20 years worth of investment in IT estates, rigidity in applications, in the architectures, client-side, client-server-side software. It's actually really hard for end users sometimes to manage their own enterprise desktop. At the same time, IT had this enormous IT operational overhead. This stops people innovating. It stops people being able to provide applications from IT to end users. And from a UI perspective, I worked 10, 15 years ago in the world of SAP, R2, R3, my SAP. The interface was designed around the business process. It was not designed around the end user. Again, look at google.com. It looks really simple. It's really complex underneath. And I think we're starting to see the emergence of applications that are coming out that put the end user first. Google's engineering philosophy is mobile first, and it goes down the stack, and at the very bottom is PC. And again, mobile interface, mobile UI is changing our expectations. It's also really expensive. I'm fortunate that I get to spend a lot of time with senior business and IT leaders, and I do ask the question, look, from your overall IT spend this year, how much of that is spent on the Gartner stat of 8 out of 10 or $8 out of $10 is spent on keeping the lights on? It hasn't changed for a decade. This number I've been talking about for a decade, and it's boring, but it's just starting to change. Because for the first time, software as a service, particularly software as a service, is enabling people to take those more commoditized services and entrust people to do that at much bigger scale. When Google talks about this data center, kind of federated, secure data center model, we're talking about huge scale. We're the 4th largest server manufacturer in the world. But we don't sell any servers. We consume it ourselves. So I think in the next 6, 12, 18 months, we can work with you as IT business leaders and say, if we could just turn that dial 5% and reduce your support and maintenance overhead, what would you do with that 5%? They'd go and spend it on investment around innovation. And that's what we hear. And that is our job, is to help you turn that dial and to release that little bit of extra capital to invest in the things that you should care about, which is your core business, not about keeping Exchange or Lotus Notes up. So is cloud computing disruptive? I don't think we would be here if we didn't agree that it really is. Enterprise technology provisioning in the next 3 to 5 years is going to look very, very different to a majority of the market today. There are going to be fewer data centers. I've had 2 or 3 meetings this year where I've met senior IT leaders with a CFO, and the CIO's been pleading with that CFO, let me build a giant data center. I can commoditize, I can collapse our per unit cost. And they've done that, and now they're trying to lease that out to third parties. Because this traditional outsourcing whereby you build your data centers is finished. And the next one down is you've just signed a 5 or 7 year outsourcing agreement with an outsourcer. We believe that market will be sunsetting. Because there are an awful lot of companies saying to us, can you help me build a business case that can justify getting out early of this outsourcing agreement? That's a big, big shift in the market. Subscription, so pay as you go, will become the most prevalent model. We think enterprise agreements are going to start to disappear because of you are demanding them to be removed. You should only have to pay for what you use. So if you come to Google and say, I have 200 users that I would like to use your services, that's fantastic. If at the end of the year you want 100, you shouldn't be penalized for only having 100 users. Just as if you want to add users, you should be able to add those at a flick of a switch. And we think this model will now just start to come through different tiers of IT provisioning in the next 3 or 4 years. We will get to a point where we'll just be completely device agnostic. Security on most of the major platform operating systems are getting very, very good. RIM, BlackBerry, led the way, and that's why they became so popular in the enterprise space. But we're seeing that collapse now because other OSs are just becoming so much better. The key point, though, is that you as a company have to be able to manage those different form factors from a single web-based console. So you have to be able to have your different operating systems that your end users just be able to pick up. When they walk in the office, they put it down. Shouldn't be any data on that. They should be able to log on, username, LDAP, Active Directory, whatever that is. They leave. It's a stateless device. There doesn't need to be data on that device at all. Think about the incredible security that you can get from doing that, as opposed to the risks associated at the moment with data being held on a traditional PC. More importantly, I think it's going to get faster and faster. I think we're going to get to a point in the next maybe 2 to 3 years where at the moment we have to think about how do we get online? So where do we get online? So whether it's Wi-Fi, I've got a kind of a USB dongle, I can tether from my phone. There's broadband at home. I think we're going to get to a position really quite quickly whereby we will choose to be offline. Okay? We'll be online the whole time, and then you will have to choose when you want to come offline. Now that's a great thing, because I think then you really do have any device access to any content, any applications, whenever you want, securely. And that's a good place. But the empowerment, I'll come back to. This is not just about recreating Office applications or Exchange servers. It is a different way of working. Give your end user the applications, the power to do their job differently, to actually make a difference. And we think empowerment and collaboration, innovation, are definitely becoming key drivers of people looking at cloud adoption. Now, cost avoidance for us, and I'll talk about personal experience. I joined Google in 2007, and we've seen a prolonged cycle of economic duress in most industries, some more than others. And 4 years ago, people were literally coming to us and saying, look, I need to save some money. I need to take money out of my expenditure now. What can you do to help us? Now, we called on average about 50 to 70% lowering of the TCO around SaaS. And then the analysts kind of were sitting very firmly on the fence because the disaster around kind of enterprise content management, the ECM category, never really kind of delivered a great deal. They came up finally on cloud and SaaS about 2.5 years ago and said, you know what, we think, based on our early predictions, that it's between 50 to 70%. But then we started to close some big customers, not SMB mid-market, but big customers who also said, actually, we know what our per unit cost is, and we've deployed Google, and we've saved 70%, and we've got these evidenced. And actually, this doesn't change a great deal across SMB and mid-market as well. There is a 50 to 70% cost avoidance opportunity for you today, and we have millions of customers who've already done that. That is really important, because I could not have even stood here 2 years ago and said that, because we didn't have the evidence. We now do. Now, SaaS, software as a service, on the applications has been decoupled from the desktop. You're decoupled from this client-server technology, this kind of kludgy way of working. But you think about the other big thing that maybe hasn't changed that much for us, which is actually the enterprise desktop itself. So I'm delivering a software as a service application via a web browser onto an old-style machine. For you as IT people or business people, these multiple tiers, the layers of complexity that you have in managing your traditional enterprise desktop hasn't really changed massively over the last 10, 15 years. You have to update the latest software. You have security patches. There's a day of the week or a day of the month where you've got to do everything. You know, on average, people don't deploy those until 90 days. 90 days you have got a security breach. That is a long, long time to leave yourself open. And a predominant amount of that risk comes through these. Upgrading new hardware. You know, there's cycles. You know, Windows XP came out 10 years ago. Only 50% of people have upgraded. Why? Because it's incredibly complex and it's really, really expensive to do. And that cost shift, we haven't really seen yet. We know about 70% cost reduction on software as a service, but you upgrade your enterprise desktop in 2011, what, and I'm paying kind of the same amount of money? It doesn't feel right. End user, admin, IT ops, hardware. We think that device as a service will become more prevalent. What is device as a service? Well, we all have mobile phones. We've all got Blackberries. We pay, can you hear me? Am I back? We pay for these different tiers. And, sorry, I've gone off thread now. So we pay for the different tiers, user, IT operations, hardware. Device as a service, we pay for our Blackberries, we pay for our smartphone bills on a monthly basis. But yet, even with an outsource agreement, we can't really see this collapsing down. So what we think will happen is that you'll see this emergence of operating system, such as the Chromebooks, which we think will be copied very, very quickly, whereby you can just say, I'm going to pay monthly. And I'll have the hardware. I'll have a hardware refresh included. Hardware replacement. If something goes wrong with that, we'll ship you a new one. Software, support, and maintenance. Now think about the beauty of this. If I'm having software as a service updated in real time, versionless, so you don't have to apply these updates, these patches. Also think about the operating system on your machine, that you also don't have to do the upgrades on these desktop environments either. All of a sudden, you've taken out an enormous amount of IT operational overhead. So this one specifically, if you collapse down those tiers and make things inherently more secure and more productive for your end users, make them more productive. So these new versions of kind of Chromebooks that have come out, they're a 10-second boot from cold and a near instantaneous boot from standby. You're taking the tiers away, you're collapsing the cost, but you're also changing the way that an end user become more productive. Now we think that there is a potential 50% cost avoidance opportunity on enterprise desktop that you can take advantage of very quickly. Software as a service, 50 to 70%. Enterprise desktop, 50%. I would argue that there are very few FDs or CFOs that you work with and for that would not be interested in that dialogue. So, we have the foundations. We think that cost avoidance, lower TCO, is a good place to start on the business case. But going back to business value and business transformation, what does that look like? And can we actually now get evidence, data analysis? So there are a couple of reports that have come out recently, one from McKinsey and one from Gartner. The IT one is obvious. CIO objectives, main agenda points for this year. Virtualization was number one. Cloud is now number one. I think this is, we all know this. What's more interesting is around the business executives who say that 75% say that cloud computing could drive value at your company. Now, 2 years ago, business executives didn't even know what cloud computing was, because I met hundreds of them, and it was like, just can you explain what this kind of notion, concept is, and how does it work, how does it operate? Well, it's applications delivered over the internet via a browser. That's cloud computing. And they say, I can lower my cost of IT on a unit basis, but it's, look at the things they're also talking to about business flexibility, scaling on these spikes of demand around business. And business are saying they see value. IT are saying, look, we're very, very well aligned on this. But what can we actually achieve? And I think Emma kind of talked about customer-related improvements. What are some of these areas whereby we now have evidence? And I'd point you to a McKinsey study. The study was about Web 2.0 and cloud computing. What they identified is 4 or 5 key areas whereby they'd actually sat down with customers and said, we get TCO, but where have you actually added value and you've evidenced it to your board members? And these reports are now available. Customer improvement is one, and internal business operations is a second one. Access to employees with best practice knowledge. And I won't delve into this into any more detail, but do have an opportunity and take some time to read this, because it's incredibly important in widening the value of the business case. Now, our customers tell us that where they are able to drive a more mobile workforce and improve collaboration, they drive innovation and productivity. Fact. Telegraph is a great example of this, and they've been a customer of Google now for about 4 years. Real-time collaboration is different to collaboration. And we talk about this notion of one version of the truth. Of course, you get version control. But organizations still spend an awful lot of time emailing attachments to each other. The poor soul, let's just say they're doing a bid for something. The poor soul has to pull in all these different responses from a sales team and technical pre-sales team, and then they sit there with version 1.0.x.a.b, and then there's .final.a. Why do we still do this? Create a document, presentation, spreadsheet in the cloud. You go to that cloud. You go to that document. You collaborate in real time. And it's much, much more efficient and quicker. And that is how we do things in Google as well. We don't have a single productivity, a single product, a single end state. Everybody contributes to that document. So if we talk about specifically the board, CIO, COO, CTO, CEO, the kind of 4 or 5 key CXO levels. What we have definitely seen in the last 12 months is this move from IT to, come on, this is the first time we've now got a little bit of breathing space in the business. Where can we drive value? Transformation, again, is a big word. People can do that. They are doing that. But business value can be pulled into these areas. Collaboration, innovation, M&A specifically. Within the M&A market, it's very, very hard for people to integrate companies with traditional IT architectures. And what they actually want is to be able to divest and to spin up organizational units and business units much more quickly, more readily, at a much lower cost. Mobility we've talked about, and I would say IT cost reduction and green environmental stewardship. This is coming up more, but I have to say, I think we've all been quite surprised at Google. This has been talked about for about 4 years, but the reality behind it has been slightly less so. So I'm just going to finish up. Our vision and strategy at Google is around 100% web. We believe that organizations will go through a journey, and that journey will either start in what's called the private cloud, which is where Google sits. It could start with, the public cloud. It could start with the private cloud, which is in effect more servers being on-site with you, or it could be on-site with one of your partners, more traditional outsourcing. You could have this hybrid model whereby certain things sit on-premise and certain things sit on a public cloud such as Google. And I think what we've learned in the last 2 years is that we respect that journey. Our 100% web message, we believe in 5 years, there will be a very small number of applications that actually sit client-side. But right now, right today, applications, platform, devices, you have a tremendous opportunity for cost avoidance, but right now to also drive business value, and if you're very lucky, drive business transformation. Thank you very much.